Let's add a method that calculates the time left from the past deadline to the current time. Luckily, JavaScript already comes with a date object with a whole lot of functionality that we can take advantage of. So let's write this getTimeUntil method right now. getTimeUntil. We'll have one argument, deadline. Within the method, let's declare a variable called time. Now, within ES6, we refrain from using the var keyword used in the previous versions of JavaScript. Now we use let or const. We most often want to use const for variables that never need updating and let for variables that do need updating. In the scope of this function, however, we'll only need to calculate this variable of time once, so we'll use the const keyword. Now, we'll use some methods within the JavaScript date object to help us. We'll set it equal to a date.parse method of the deadline, and then we'll need to subtract another number by parsing the current time right now. And the reason I can simply say new date is because by default, when we declare a new date object within JavaScript, it simply grabs the current time and sets that time as its time. So the subtraction calculation is subtracting the current time between the deadline and the current date. Within that time, we'll be able to find our current relevant seconds, minutes, hours, and days that we need to throw onto our counter in order to update the application. To illustrate this, let's simply console log the time so that we can see this in action, and then we'll add a call to it within our render method for now, for testing purposes, just to see our function working and what this number actually looks like. So let's save this. So the time is something like 3,118,000,000, a number way too long to really recognize, and of course not to show on the screen. So now that we see this number, we need to really distinguish the seconds, minutes, and hours and days from this long 10-digit length number. So let's add some math and computer science to this function, and we're going to take advantage of dividing in the modulo in order to grab our relevant numbers. So similarly, we're going to declare a const seconds and set that equal to the math.floor function, divide this time by 1,000, and modulo that whole thing by 60. And the modulo looks like the percentage sign. So that whole calculation by 60, just like this. And those of you unfamiliar with the modulo, what modulo does is it essentially outputs the remainder of a function. So if I did 10 modulo 3, the output would be 1. But 6 modulo 3, the output would be 0. Because 6 divided by 3, the remainder is 0, but 10 divided by 3, the remainder is 1. Moving on, in order to get our minutes, it'll look very similar. However, we need to do an extra division of the time by 60 in order to grab our relevant minutes. Hours look similar. Math.floor again. And bear with me here. These functions are going to take a little time to calculate. So here we go. We're going to divide time itself by 1,000 times 60 times 60 again. And this time, for our hours, we're going to modulo by 24. Since there are only 24 hours in the day, let's go ahead and add some spacing so it's easier to read. And don't worry, I'm not calculating these numbers off the top of my head. I'm not some mathematical genius. I wrote these down previously. Or maybe I am a mathematical genius and I just don't want you guys to know. So once again, I'm going to floor on the days and then divide by 1,000 times 60 times 60 times 24. And let's output these variables to see if they seem relevant. minutes, and then we'll do our minutes. We want to see what the hours look like, so hours. Then finally, what are the days? Let's do days. We'll go ahead and save. And as it reloads, looks like we got 347 days, 8 hours, 35 minutes, and 1 second until Christmas. So close. Huh. And it looks like everything's updating great. So the last thing we need to do is simply update the state. So let's first update the state of our days. We can say days is equal to days. We'll save this. And look at that. We have an infinite loop. So we have something very faulty going on here. We can't call getTimeUntil within our render method and pass a this.setState function. Otherwise, we'll incur an infinite loop within our function. So within the next video, we'll learn about lifecycle methods to fix this problem.